All right, so now, oh.
To help out? Thank you, Peter.
Peter, as soon as I can get in, okay.
Hi, folks. Herzl is on his way in. We had a link problem.
Well, can you hear me, Andrew?
Yes, I can, Rabbi.
All right, we're waiting.
Herzl, no, Herzl and I are on the phone now. He's almost in.
Oh, that's good, because I'm here. It's right now here in the sanctuary. It's Peter and it's me.
Okay.
Here we are.
All right, here comes Herzl. Ah, we see you now. Very good.
Right, now we see Herzl.
Thank you, Andrew.
Herzl, it was wonderful seeing Meme. She was here with the Grinkers and with Andrew, is that his name? Edward from Wappingers Falls. Thanks, Mike. So.
Oh, Herzl, 1 second. We need to unmute you. Hold on. Okay, go ahead.
Well,
Good. Hello.
Hi, Herzl.
Can you hear me all right now?
Absolutely, but let's give it a couple of minutes, then I'm going to do a quick introduction, Herzl.
Okay. The topic is hope.
Absolutely. What we called it is, if I am not for myself, who will be for me, of hope.
Okay.
So I know there's some people still walking around outside, and we want to let the number of people connecting up. We went a little longer than I thought we were going to go this morning.
Oh, I listened to the services. I listened with Mimi and Ed, and I love the Kol Nidre.
Yeah.
And Barbara was here too.
Hi, Barbara.
Hi.
I heard her voice. I'm not sure they can hear you from there. I think we're going to have to do it with the mic.
We can barely hear.
Okay,
Is
good.
this-
So if we do it really loud.
Is the right? Do I have the right mic on?
Yeah, Herzl, you sound great.
It's okay. Okay, I have the Yeti mic that you gave me.
It sounds great in here.
Oh, good.
Well, so
I just lost you.
let me at least begin, Herzl, as we continue to have people come in. Years ago, I think when I was introducing you, I said something like, your name says it all, okay? The name Herzl itself. So even though you kind of grew up in Burlington, Vermont, if I remember correctly, you had your bar mitzvah just as the state of Israel was being born.
The state was born 5 days after my bar mitzvah.
And they had to be connected, of course. Or your parents would not put you
Sure, it
Herzl?
was connected for me, not for them.
Well, someone knew when they named you Herzl.
Well, that was my father's passion.
Well, and so you became quite the dreamer and builder. And even though
Yes.
you went to school in Vermont and Harvard and John Hopkins and NYU, there was the time that you were also at JTS. Because, of course,
Yes,
you come from a long
I went
line
through the
of rabbis.
Mechina course.
Because you can trace your lineage all the way back to the Baal Shem Tov. And
It seems to go a long time, but when I became a psychiatrist, my father said that all a psychiatrist is a rabbi who takes Blue Cross Blue Shield.
and of course, my dad, who was a psychiatrist, tried to say something similar, but he couldn't come up with something. But he figured out it was about as close as I was going to come.
Yes.
And Herzl has, in addition, I mean, what brought him here when he came here to Milwaukee was becoming chair of psychiatry and professor at the Medical College of Wisconsin, and also, of course, building up our county mental health system. And he has been deeply involved in Jewish life his entire life, whether it was helping the absorption of all kinds of immigrants to Israel, particularly, if I remember, the Soviet immigration and the Ethiopian immigration.
Yes.
Israel. How many years were you doing this, Herzl?
22 years.
22 years, while he was taking care of so many of us here at the same time. He has been this incredible builder of so many things that he took on, including this building, this sanctuary. Without you, Herzl, this never would have happened. Nor would
Without
have
you, it never would have happened.
We wouldn't have had Toby's beautiful work here in this magnificent sanctuary. And you have been my teacher, our teacher, for so many decades. I am forever grateful for that. And so when we took the theme that is being done in lifelong learning, which is Hillel's quote from Pirkei Avot, we figured if not now, when, to get you, and talking with Kai later on, if I am only for myself, who will be for me? And so we thank you for doing this and for sharing your time talking to us about hope. You're on, Herzl.
Thank you so much, Rabbi. I must say, so much of the interior of the temple is my wife, Barbara. And I wouldn't have had the life I had were it not for Barbara or being able to have a home in Israel. Tonight, can you see me okay? Because it keeps varying on what I see. It's okay? My topic is really hope. And it's based on a book that I published just a year ago called Of Hope. And it's my memoirs. The book begins with a phrase from Elie Wiesel, who had such an influence on me. Elie Wiesel said, "Despair is the question. Hope is the answer." So amazing after the life that Elie Wiesel, some of you know his books, Nights, and he held that to be Jewish was to hold hope. To understand Jewish hope, we need to refer to the phrase that's by Hillel that Rabbi Berkson just mentioned. Imein anili mili. If I am not for myself, what am I? Who am I? And that statement, if you stop right there, you're deep into Greek philosophy. You're deep into the definitions which Plato and Aristotle and Herodotus gave. Because they wrote, even in writing history, it was about individual. Indeed, the concept of hope as it came forward in the great existentialist philosophers, so marvelously reviewed by Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, who did his PhD at Oxford in philosophy before he became a rabbi and understood them. And so much of what we've been raised in the American climate is about I. If I'm not for myself, who am I? But you see, that phrase, standing alone, is not Jewish. It has to be followed by imrak la'atzmi ma'ani. If I'm only for myself, what am I? And then the imlo achshav ematai, and if not now, when? If you'll be patient with me, I'd like to talk a bit about how that appeared in the Greek philosophers and how Jewish philosophy became so different. Let's start with the word optimism. Optimism is not a word in the Hebrew language. Can you imagine? In biblical Hebrew, there is no word for optimism. In modern Hebrew, it's called optimiyut. It's derived from the English. Optimist means that you think that everything will just get better. You don't have to do anything about it. It's just going to get better. If you look at the definitions of optimism, it's a doctrine that this world is the best possible world. And how often have we heard that? A second definition from Merriam-Webster is that put the most favorable construction on what others do. For the philosopher Leibniz, optimism is the best of all possible worlds. And hope becomes individual in Greek thought. It is wishful thinking. Thucydides said that those with hope have a poor understanding of their situation. In Timaeus, Plato reconstructs a situation where people are out of touch with what's really going on, and therefore they're hopeful. Now, my fellow members of CEBJ, do you think that's Jewish? Well, think about it. It has had so much influence on us as Jews, but it is not Jewish. Let me start with a Jewish construction of hope. And it begins with a matter of tense. For the Jew, we are always in a sustained struggle against the world. That is, in the name of the world that could be, we are in a struggle to improve the world that is. So one of the dimensions of hope is the future. Perhaps one of the most formative moments in Jewish life occurred when Moses stood before the burning bush. And he encountered God in the burning bush. Moses asks God what name he should use when people ask him who he is. And God replies enigmatically in a phrase that occurs nowhere else in the Tanakh, Echyeh asher echyeh. Now, non-Jewish translations say that's I am that I am, or that's who I am the one who is. That's a mistranslation. Echyeh is the future tense in Hebrew. Much more fundamental is the correct translation. When God says, I will be what I will be, That is to say that God belongs to the future tense. His call is that which is not yet. It's not optimism about things being great right now. It's about the future. A second part of our sense of hope, aside from it being about the future and not the present, is that it's about community, not individual. So much of Greek philosophy and modern philosophy is about how hope can spring from the individual. But in Jewish life, if I'm only for myself, what am I? Think of what that means. It's a necessary corollary that we are part of a family and a community. My father's favorite expressions about Jewish life was that we all must adhere to Achdut Yisrael and Ahavat Yisrael. Achdut Yisrael means the unity of Israel, no matter what our differences. Ahavat Yisrael means the love of Israel, the love of our group. It doesn't exclude love of others. It certainly does not do that. But we, in order to move towards a future, must bond together as a community, as a family and community. So let's take some examples of despair going to hope. The question is despair, the answer is hope. Let me summarize my father's story, which I think is relevant to this. My father was executive director of the Zionist movement during World War II. All of the horrible papers from the Polish underground passed his desk. And so each detail of the horror of the Holocaust, he was experiencing and understanding as it was happening. He went from congregation to congregation to try to unite the Jewish people, to create Israel, and to make possible the immigration of those who were in harm's way. One day, I was about 10, it was early 1945, and I heard the sound of weeping coming from my father's study. I'd never heard him cry before. So I tiptoed into his study and he took me on his lap. And crying, he said to me, 6 million Jews have been murdered, and I was able to do nothing about it. That was a despair. But my father said to me then, as you grow up, keep working to create a state of Israel and to create free migration so that any Jew who's in trouble will have a safe place to go. That was his hope. I came to understand that hopes are realized by future generations. But indeed, right after my bar mitzvah, the state of Israel was declared. My father's family had been there for 7 generations. Many of them were in the Palmach and then in the Israeli army. My grandmother's family were descended from Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Ladi, the founder of Chabad Judaism, and his granddaughter, Menucha Rachel Slonim, came to Hebron and was my grandmother's grandmother. We were terribly tied as a family to Eretz Yisrael. and to the wars that ensued, which were terrifying to all of us. And yet we had hope. The generation after my father's generation was able to begin the rebuilding of Eretz Yisrael and the effort to bring about Ahavat Yisrael. That's one example of despair leading to some hopes being fulfilled. Let me give you an example from my own life. I became very involved in the community mental health revolution. And I started at Johns Hopkins back in the early 60s. I won't go into the history of the psychiatric care, which I do in my book, but briefly, there's a rocking cradle in the Shelburne Museum, which has artifacts from all over Vermont. The thing is about 6'5" long. And what it was a place where the mentally ill were strapped and rocked to calm them at home. And there wasn't treatment. In the 1830s, Dorothea Dix started the state hospital movement, an effort to treat people actively in state hospitals, another revolution. They started to decay. And then the Kirkbride Revolution came about in 1870, 40 years later, 2 generations later. And it was using the countryside and fresh air to try to help people to get better. And it started to decay into the state hospitals. And then starting in 1895 and going on for the next 20 years came the Freudian Revolution and the revolution of having a team that Adolf Meyer started, the biopsychosocial model. I won't go into detail because this talk is not about psychiatry. I'm just saying there was another revolution. When I started in psychiatry, the report action for mental health had just come out by a group of psychiatrists. John F. Kennedy passed the Mental Health Center Act. And it was the beginning of trying to create small hospitals that would give acute care and then communities which could accept the patient back in the community getting outpatient treatment. It was a revolution. It was in 1975 I came to Milwaukee. People ask, why did I come to Milwaukee? Well, actually, I came to Milwaukee to meet my wife, Barbara, and it worked out great. And that part of it is wonderful. But what motivated me initially was I was invited to come out to look at the chair. And I looked at the county grounds. And what I saw were 2,000 patients who were confined to buildings that were as old as 75, 80 years old. They were snake pits. So why did I take the job? I talked to my chairman, Joel Elkes. Joel Elkes was the discoverer of Thorazine and was like a second father to me. His father had led the Kaunas community in Lithuania and was murdered with his community in Auschwitz after sending his son to Great Britain to study. And so Joel's advice meant enormous to me. And what he said to me is, that is the epitome of the worst situation. Herzl, you've always been happiest building. Take that worst situation and make it good. And so I undertook that job. And for 8 years, I poured my heart into it. But I'll tell you, when I walked into buildings where frost covered one wall and people were in leather restraints, I felt despair in my heart. this is not my profession. Slowly, one by one, we got them out. We built over 6 of the dreamed of community mental health centers. We opened 4 new general hospital units. We brought 90 psychiatrists in from outside and staffed them. And I could see the beginning of a solution. In 1978, we completed a new mental health center that was a specialized building on the county grounds to make sure that we cared for the special cases that couldn't be handled in general hospital. Rosalind Carter, President Carter's wife, came to dedicate it. The Carters were incredible fans of trying to bring about the community mental health revolution. 40 years later, Reagan was in power, and he stopped all federal funding. Our system fell apart. I was in despair. I took a sabbatical, and I went to Jerusalem, and I ran into a friend from Baltimore who was head of the Jewish Agency. And he hugged me and he said, "Herzl, I need you." I said, "What for, Chuck?" And he said, "I'm about to turn Jerusalem into Baltimore." And this is Chuck Hoffberger. I said, "Chuck, even you couldn't do that." And he said, "Yes, I can. I'm about to bring in 15,000 Black Jews from Ethiopia, and watch what happens. The racism will return unless we do something about it. And I want you here." And thanks to Mel Zarrett, who was my teacher, my friend, my leader, who really understood what we were trying to do and helped me to get this done, I started working on the absorption. And thanks to Barbara, I was able to spend 3 or 4 times a year in Israel volunteering my time. Thanks to the dean of the medical school at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I went in the faculty and I was going to go half-time, which is not a lot to live on. He said to me, 25% of your time is for caring for the unfortunate. And I said, "But Dean Pitot, I'm going to be working with people across the world in Israel." And he drew himself up and said, "The University of Wisconsin-Madison is an international university. Wherever you help the unfortunate, you'll get that quarter of your salary." So he enabled me also. But the revolution in community mental health, even as I was working on my father's hope, my hope was falling apart. And what do I know? Well, I continue to teach psychiatry because I know a future generation will find a different answer that will incorporate the team and the hospital and the community mental health movement. And they will find a better way to do it. And there's usually a psychiatric revolution every 50 years or so. We're due for a new one. I hope I'm alive to see it, but I may not be. Now, why am I telling you these 2 stories? Because they're both stories of despair, and they're both stories of understanding that hope may not occur in my lifetime. That optimism at some point gets silly. There's no word for it in Hebrew. Our word is hope. And our ultimate hope is for the Messianic revolution. The ultimate hope is that a Messianic era will come. And until then, all we can do is struggle with the status quo, not just as individuals, but as a group. When I came home from Israel, one of the first things I undertook was to work for my own synagogue, CEEBJ. And we worked on building a building. Because we each must address what's wrong with what's around us. And we must not pretend we're leaders. All we are facilitators of a group. So no single person does anything. This congregation was built by a group that includes, of course, its rabbi, but also many of you who worked with me, and all I was a facilitator. Let me go back to Jonathan Sacks. I've given you two examples from my lifetime, my father's despair and my despair. If you look at the structure of biblical narrative, and I'm quoting from Jonathan Sacks here, in literature, there are many narratives, but they all have one thing in common, what Frank Kermode called the sense of an ending. They reach closure. Some end with, they all lived happily ever after. We call these fairy tales. Others end in death and defeat. We call these tragedies. There are other types, but they all have beginning and an end. That's what makes them story. Now consider with me for a moment Jewish literature. Let's start by considering Genesis. The story of the Jewish people begins with God's call to Abraham to leave his land and his birthplace and his father's house, to travel to the land that I will show you. 7 times God promises Abraham the land. Yet Abraham had to haggle with the Hittites to buy one small plot of land to bury his wife Sarah. And Jacob and his family are forced into exile in Egypt. The book of Genesis ends with a promise unfulfilled. Then Exodus begins. God calls Israel to lead the Israelites back. God calls Moses to lead the Israelites back to freedom in the promised land. Now we feel the story is about to close like a good Greek story, but it doesn't come. Instead, a journey that should have taken days lasts 40 years. In the final scene of Deuteronomy, we see Moses again, still on the far side of the Jordan. And God grants him the vision of seeing the land of Israel that will be settled after his death. The book ends again, the natural ending is deferred. Tanakh as a whole ends in the second book of Chronicles, chapter 36, with Israel in exile again, this time in Babylonia, and Cyrus giving them permission to return. We're almost back where we began, in the same region from which Abraham and his family first set out. I don't know of any other stories that have the same form, namely a beginning, but no end. We wouldn't think of them as stories at all, were it not that we know the ending. It has been there since the beginning. God's 3 promises to Abraham of children, of a land, and an influence on humanity such that through you, in quotes, all the families of the earth will be blessed. So there is an ending, but it's always beyond the visible horizon. That was the ending for my father's despair. That's the ending for my despair. A future not yet realized. The same is true of Jewish belief. Judaism is the only civilization whose golden age is in the future. We talk about the golden age of Greece and of Rome and of the United Kingdom and of America. But in Judaism, the golden age is in the future. It is the Messianic age, the age of peace, when nation shall not lift up sword against nation, and the Lord shall be one and his name one. To be a Jew is to reply to the question, has the Messiah come? With the words, not yet. In the fine phrase of Harold Fish, the Jewish narrative is the unappeased memory of a future still to be fulfilled. Why? What does this tell us about Judaism? At the heart of Judaism is a belief so fundamental to Western civilization that we take it for anything, yet it's anything but self-evident. It's been challenged many times, rarely more so than today. It is the belief in human freedom. We are what we choose to be. And what we choose to be as a group, as Jews, is what brings the future, the Messianic era. The ancients believed that human destiny lay in the stars, a blind fate, what the Greeks called anarchy. Spinoza argued that our lives are governed by natural necessity. Marx claimed that history was determined by economic interests. Freud held that human behavior was shaped by unconscious drives. Neo-Darwinians argue that we are governed by genetic codes hardwired into our brains. Freedom in all of these theories is an illusion. This view is challenged in the opening chapters of the Torah. For the first time, God is seen as beyond nature, creating nature by a free, uncoerced act of will. By creating human beings in his image, he bestows something of that freedom on us. Alone among created life forms, we too are capable of being creative. Biblical narrative is the ongoing drama of human freedom. The early narratives are tragic. First, Adam and Eve and the trouble they get into. Then Cain, they abuse their freedom. Then it's repeated on a global scale by the generation of the flood. And then again, on a global scale by the builders of the Tower of Babel. People use their freedom to transgress boundaries, to deprive others of their freedom, so a new beginning becomes necessary. Abraham is told to leave all these things which constrain freedom, our land, birthplace, father's house, and begin a new life in a covenant with God. Genesis is about that covenant as it affects individuals and families. The rest of the Tanakh is about the covenant as it applies to the life of a nation. The Jewish story, still unfinished, is about a freedom of journey, a journey from multiple forms of slavery to what Levinas called difficult freedom. Torah is the template of responsible freedom, our constitution of history. And we have seen in my lifetime, I'm old, I'm 86, I've seen the complete desecration of freedom by the Nazis. I've seen the desecration of freedom by the communists. And I see mistakes we're making right now. Claiming freedom in a way that we spread disease. Claiming freedom in a way that we deprive others of their right to life. Human beings have a special quality intimately related to the language of Genesis, and it's the use of the future tense. Only beings who can imagine the world other than the one they live in are capable of real freedom. And if we are free, the future is open, dependent on us. We know the beginning of the story, but not the end. That's why he is about to take the Israelites from slavery to freedom. God tells Moses that his name is, I will be what I will be. And Judaism, the religion of freedom, is faith in the future tense. And Hillel's statement is an absolute necessity for that freedom. Because if it's only in Eina Nili Mili, if it's only that, Imrak la'atzmi ma'ani, if I'm only for myself, that's not real freedom. Freedom is being part of a people struggling for the right homeland, but for a homeland. Freedom is struggling with the issues that break our hearts when other human beings, the Palestinians, suffer from bad leadership, and we are the hand of their execution. That's freedom. And the question is not simple. To say we're abusing our freedom may miss the point. Not having strength in Israel could mean the destruction of our homeland. It's like all our struggles. They're not simple. The only struggle that has a beautiful ending is the Messianic Era. And there was a big debate between Maimonides and Nachmanides about the Messianic Era. Maimonides believed that we would all become so imbued with the Spirit of God that we would overcome our baser drives, the bad within ourselves, and create a messianic universe. Nachmanides believed that those base instincts would be destroyed and we'd only be good. We can still listen to their argument and not know, but just have hope that ahead of us is a messianic era. So I basically have based this analysis on Jonathan Sacks, and I can't recommend too heavily that you read him and enjoy him. He unfortunately died this past year. But the way he saw it, Western civilization is the product of two cultures, ancient Greece and ancient Israel. The Greeks believed in fate. The future is determined by the past. The Greeks could understand the noble individual whose past events determined what happened to him, whether it's the tragedy of Oedipus or the thoughts of the Stoics. It was different. Jews gave not the idea of tragedy, although God knows we've seen too much tragedy. Jews gave the world the idea of hope. The whole of Judaism is a set of laws and narratives designed to create in people, families, communities, and a nation habits that defeat despair. Judaism is the voice of hope in the conversation of humankind. So to summarize, I've made 2 points. One is Judaism is not about the past or the present, even though we learn from the past, Zachor, and we struggle with the present. It is about the future, hope. And the second point is that Judaism is about a community, a nation, a people who struggle with the present together, not alone, but as a community. Talked longer than I meant to. Can I open the floor to discussion? Comment?
Absolutely. So what I'm going to do for folks, I assume, Andrew, you're still there?
Yes, I am.
So if anyone on Zoom has something they'd like to ask, and I'm here with people here, and I can pass the microphone around here too.
Actually, if they would come up to that microphone, it would be great. We could see them that way.
Okay, there are two microphones here that we can come up to. So is there anybody? Since I can't see who is out there, Andrew.
Oh,
I have to
Bob,
trust
can you
to
send?
see.
Bob, can you send the? I can see if anyone has questions here on Zoom. I'm not seeing any right now, or any comments. Audrey Berman.
Hi. My question is that when you talk about the source of our hope is in the Messianic age, I know that you're not saying that we should sit around and wait for the Messiah to show up, that it is our actions that we can take now to move towards a better world. I just wanted to, how could you help us understand that distinction a little bit better?
Yes, thank you so much. That is such a good question because the point is very important. I've talked about hope and I've talked about despair, but between the two is what we do now. And what we do now is struggle with what's wrong, and that's what makes us Jewish. We don't just say, oh, we're optimists, I'm not worried about it. So for me, I had to come to Milwaukee and struggle with those 2,000 patients on the county grounds. But in ordinary life, as a psychiatrist, I listen to the homeless, I see the hungry, and I belong to a Judaism that cares about those issues. And I'm so proud of members of our Jewish community who are leaders in trying to deal with things that are wrong right now. And there are different wrongs at different times. Sometimes there's tyranny. Right now, there's disease. And we work with our fellow doctors to struggle against disease. We don't give up and say, let people die. And so the most important part you've brought out with your question, and thank you so much, Audrey, because it's the struggle. The Messiah doesn't come like in a Greek story, it just happens. The Messianic era comes from centuries of Jewish struggle, and we will continue to struggle and hope for a time when the Messianic era is here and there's less suffering and less injustice and less lack of freedom.
We're picking up somebody's keyboard. Someone is plugging.
That was
away.
me. My apologies.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Andrew. Taking notes on the talk, obviously. So, Herzl, so how, in your role as a psychiatrist, when despair descends into depression, how do you respond? And I'm not talking necessarily about an individual's depression. I've seen depression infect groups of people, institutions, how do we move from that? How do we begin to carry people? How do we bring back hope?
Yeah. You know, I'm so pleased you raised that question.
I mean,
Nobody can look at the horror of the Holocaust without despair. And yet, in my lifetime, I started to treat people who experienced the Holocaust without charge with Dr. Elke's permission at Hopkins. And I've now seen over 100 Holocaust survivors. And I learned from them. What I learned is that people in the face of despair and depression and horrible persecution can still bring out strong qualities. Yes, many died and never had that chance. But so many of that 100 who I've seen have brought out their strength and their goodness in response to that despair. The second point I'd want to make is that depression is a point at which horrible events afflict the mind and cause changes in brain chemistry. It's factually correct that there are some genetic factors in predisposing to depression. But in our era, it's highly treatable in individuals. So I want to separate what I can do for an individual in terms of medication and psychiatric treatment and what I do as a group. There was a group of us who were all young men in community psychiatry. We used to meet once a year in New Orleans. We called the group Future Oriented Group. And the acronym for it was FOG, because we knew we were in a fog. As a group, so many of my colleagues felt horrible despair as we saw the death of the community mental health revolution. For me, it meant trying to treat individual patients and do my best to deal with what's wrong with the world in my own way, as best I can as a Jew. So it's not my own way, it's our own ways. And I think that's what we do in the present, in the face of despair and depression. I don't think it's simple. Because we are a family and community, the loss of another is a terribly sad event, and the grief and mourning goes on. This period of the COVID virus, I had personal friendships with several people who died. And I found these 2 years very, very difficult years for me personally, because I certainly experienced sadness. And I turned to my Judaism. I turned to it not for myths, not like Greek philosophy. I turned to it to remember that human beings pass on. And it's the generation of Bet Yisrael that gives us hope. I don't know if that's a very good answer to your question, Rabbi, but it's the way I struggle with the question, as we all do.
Thanks, Herzl. What I think we're going to have to do, just looking at time, is we had promised a little break between you and Kai, who's coming on in about 10 minutes. So I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for so many things. Not just what you did today, but what you've done for all of us for so long. Wish you an easy fast.
Thank you.
Gemar Chatima Tova, and look forward to seeing you in person soon. Enjoy having your daughter around, And we'll talk to you all, and we'll see everyone back here in about 10 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Fatima.
If folks on Zoom want to chat, but hold on, let me see.
Yeah.
Folks can chat on Zoom. On Zoom if they like. Hold on.
And we can hear you here too.
Well, there you go. So say only nice things, because the rabbi can hear you.
Not just the rabbi.
Oh, Sharon, I just saw your question. Is it too late? Yeah, I think Sharon left. Okay, we'll see you in. Everyone is welcome to stay on. We'll be starting again with Kai in about 10 minutes.
bet this does too.
I turned it off.
So Kai, you're all set. As co-host, you can mute or unmute yourself anytime you want. I know we have a few minutes to go.
Hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you great, but the light behind you
Oh.
makes you a little hard to see.
But I don't know if this is on.
Okay, let me see if I can find a better location. Or put down the blinds. Let's see.
That'd be great. Yeah, just the light behind you makes it hard.
Is that better? Oops. Let's see.
Yep.
Can you see? Oops. Can you see me better now?
Larry? Hold on. I can see you. Yes, I can see you better. You look terrific.
Okay. Great.
Looks like Rabbi will be heading back into the sanctuary.
We are looking from the sanctuary. It's still not good. If there's any way you can kind of pull the shades behind you or put a light on your face, because right now, it's your face.
Oh, it's darker there.
Let me try.
Thank you, Cantor.
I'm wondering if I should try to go outside.
Whatever works for you.
Okay, let me try that.
It's a beautiful day.
I was going to say, if there's a shade behind you, if you can make that a little, I don't know if she left already. Kai, if you can, is that a shade where you can turn it one way or the other? If you turn it the other way, that might help. If you make it a little darker behind you, that will probably help. I don't think we need to have me in the picture.
Yes?
Can you put the picture back up in the sanctuary of Kai? Let's see. So we can see. Someone can switch the image back to the ISO zoom image or something so we can see the image in the sanctuary.
Bob, can you turn back to Zoom, please? Not on Cantor.
Can you just
And actually, can you go to, hold on, let's
Kai.
go. Can you go to Kai? Yeah.
Full screen.
Although Kai's not on, hold on, she's not back on yet.
Oh, I see. Full screen, very small in the full screen.
Oh, there's Kai's soon-to-be screen.
Yeah, it is much better there. Yeah, it's much better on the screens, the actual TVs.
better.
I think it's still the light behind you is making your face a little dark. So if there's something we can, maybe you can orient your just a little, turn your screen so you're not in front of that window. If you turn your screen and your orientation so you're not in front of the window behind you.
Perhaps so the plant is behind you as opposed to the window. If you can turn. I don't know if you can.
Or if you can close the blind a little bit. But I think if you turn so the window's not behind you, that would probably help.
I got something wrong with
I think you're doing it, but I think you froze, so we're not seeing the different image yet.
Andrew, is this better?
I can see you. It's just because there's a window right behind you, it makes your face hard to see.
So if you just,
do you know what I mean?
Can turn your computer maybe 30 degrees, to your left or to the right or something, so you are not directly behind the window.
But you know what? If we can't make that happen, we'll go like this.
Recording in progress.
Kai, are you there? Or are you frozen again?
Kai, can you hear us? Hold on, Kai, let me unmute you. Although you're a co-host, so. Hi, Kai. I'm on the phone with Kai. 1 second, everyone.
Can you hear me now? Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Boy, it's a bad connection.
Okay. Yeah. There's so much light in every room, so it's not really dim. Even when I shut the shades a little bit, the light still comes in. Should I maybe just put my picture up? Would that be better? Okay. Okay, thank you.
Everyone, we're going to start like this, Rabbi.
Shalom, everyone.
I want to be sure that, Kai, we're going to be able to hear you because the connection's been a little shaky. I'm just talking about the audio, not even the video.
Window, I am unmuted. Can you hear me? If someone could give me a thumbs up.
Kai, it sounds like the internet connection is not good. The audio is very stuttery. Perhaps, you know what? We could have you call in to the Zoom with your phone, and we can still see you. So, can I give you a number to try? Hold on. We'll get started in a minute, folks.
Well, what I'll do, Kai, while we're setting you up, I'm going to give you a brief introduction, okay? I'm hoping you can hear me a little bit so you can correct everything I do wrong. So Kai has been a blessing to this community since she moved here. She has a bachelor's in political science and philosophy from BU from Boston University and training in public health from the University of Illinois. Since she has come to Milwaukee, she has reached our community in so many ways, but in particular, her work on behalf of various marginalized and vulnerable communities. She was the person behind Tables Across Borders. She has been the person who has helped integrate and work with new immigrant communities here in town. And now we're working with her in terms of welcoming Afghan refugees, so many of whom, of course, have been relocated for the moment by Madison. And I was talking to Peter Gilbert, who's here, who's preparing to take stuff out there to be able to provide for them. And she now, of course, blesses us by being the executive director of our local JCRC, Jewish Community Relations Council. There are a number of other positions Kai has held, but I should also mention that she is a biker. We have some other bikers or former bikers here. I don't know exactly what you're writing now, Kai, but that's exciting too. So we are thrilled that you are with us this Yom Kippur Day as we have taken Hillel's line from Pirkei Avot, Imena Lili, Mili, and Kushanila Atzmi Ma'ani, Ve'ematai Lo Akshav, Ve'mo Akshav Ve'ematai. And so when we talked, of course, we talked about working with you on the second part of his saying, and if I'm only for myself, who am I? And so because of your experience, we talked of sharing, of course, looking at welcoming the stranger through our texts, and of course today. And so we're delighted you're with us, and we look forward to learning with you. So I hope you're still there.
So Rabbi, Kai she's there, she's dialing in on her phone, so the audio will be better.
Good. So maybe she didn't even hear everything I said.
She might not have.
Suffice to say, we are thrilled you're with us. Hopefully she's talking to Andrew.
Okay, Kai, you're there. I see your phone. Now we're going to see if we can unmute you. If you put the phone up to your ear so you can hear it, there's probably a button you push, maybe 6 or something, to unmute. So push it on your phone. I'm not sure if it's 6. Unfortunately, it might tell you. Can't hear you yet. Hold on. Let me see if I can find it really quickly. 1 second. Okay. Yep, it's *6. So if you'll do *6 on your phone, it should unmute you. Okay, folks. We're still not quite there yet. It's lovely to see all your faces.
Andrew, can you hear Kai at all on the phone itself or no?
I can't because she is not unmuted. I believe she dropped off with the attempt of the computer with the. She wanted to try to dial back in.
Okay. Kai has also done some amazing work with the Rohingya community here in town. We've worked very closely with her over the years, and again, it's fascinating that Milwaukee has one of the largest populations of both Rohingya and, of course, Hmong, who have resettled here over the years in the country. I think I haven't. I had last talked to Kai. There were some other concerns. Jewish Family Services in Madison. They're one of the agencies. Yeah. There's only one agency in Milwaukee that has had some. There are two now. Lutheran and International. Unfortunately, our local Jewish Family Services kind of got out of the refugee resettlement business a number of years ago, right? See her, but now we can't hear.
Oh. Okay, hold on one second. Hold on. Kai, we see you. You look great. Are you I'm not seeing any sound. There's no, Kai, there's no sound. I have an idea. I have another idea. 1 second. Kai, I'm going to call you.
That's what I was going to do.
I have a last idea.
Hello.
Okay, Kai, I have this idea. I'm going to Zoom. You're going to talk. I'm going to conference this into the Zoom. So I'm going to do it and stay on the line.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
I don't know what we would do without Andrew.
Welcome to Zoom. Enter your meeting ID followed by pound. Enter your participant ID followed. Please enter the meeting password.
And we also thank all of you for your patience, too.
You are in the meeting now. There are more than 20 participants in the meeting. This meeting is being recorded. You are muted. You can mute or unmute yourself by pressing *6. You have been muted by the meeting host and cannot unmute yourself. You are unmuted.
Kai, I think we're here.
Can you hear me now?
Let's see.
Kai,
Yeah, yes.
Yes,
can people can hear Kai now?
yes.
Go for it.
Okay. Okay, I am so sorry, everyone. It's like Murphy's Law. Everything was going fine with me in Zoom until today. So I just want to say thank you for having me here. I'm very honored to be here with you today on our holiest day of our Jewish calendar. Over the last several weeks, from Elul
which was the last month in our calendar, Tishrei, the first month in our calendar, we've gone through a lot of it's been an intense period of reflection, repairing, and rebalancing, hopefully. We're also in a Shemitah year, which calls for us to look at ways to give. How can we bring the Shemitah year into contemporary times? We reflect and address the behaviors that may have harmed others. We make teshuvah, and we commit to do better. How do we confront our broken world and prepare ourselves for this new year? How do we participate in Tikkun Olam, teshuvah, tehillah, commitment to our community, and simcha, centering our joy? In doing these things, we renew our covenant to Hashem, ourselves, and to others. In the backdrop of this, we continue to face unprecedented challenges, the COVID pandemic, parallel epidemics of societal injustice, whether it's racism manifested in various ways, to the rise of anti-Semitism, to the assault on immigrants and asylum seekers. Kids remain at the border. Rohingya, Congolese, Eritreans, Karen people, Syrian people, all continue to flee. And that right now, currently, there are about 12,000 Afghans who are stationed at Fort McCoy. All of these isms break our world and take us farther away from Hashem. It's all very exhausting work. But in Pirkei Avot, Rabbi Tarfon said, you are not obligated to complete the work, but you're not excused from desisting from it. In the Torah, it says over 36 times, there are references made to welcoming the stranger. From an Exodus, where it states, shall not oppress a stranger, for you know the feeling of the stranger, having yourselves been strangers in the land of Egypt. To Leviticus, when a stranger resides with you in your land, you shall not wrong him. The stranger who resides with you shall be with you as one of your citizens. You shall love him as yourself, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. So as we can say, we're all obligated to take care of not only ourselves, but others. How are we doing this, I ask ourselves as we reflect. How are we welcoming the stranger? How have we made strangers also of folks within our community? How can we come together to support the strangers, the immigrants, refugees, asylum seekers, people who are not in our community, but who are disenfranchised? And how can we also not make strangers of folks who don't agree with us politically, who don't look like us, who don't eat like us, but may be of our tribe? Torah must be lived via our actions, words, and deeds. As we know, our thoughts, our speech, and our deeds are important because they often influence life or death. We must remember that the world is built on kindness, as it says in Psalm 89. If the world is sustained through kindness, how do we become kind? In the Mishnah, it states on three things the world stands: Torah, service to Hashem, and acts of human kindness. In Leviticus, it states, do not stand by while your neighbor's blood is shed. These are all the things that we need to remember. This community has been extremely, extremely supportive of refugees, but there's more to do. We've done a great job despite not having a resettlement presence from our organized Jewish community, meaning that we do not resettle refugees here. But there are certain, many of us who've been involved with HIAS, who've been contacting legislators and really active in the community to mobilize folks. Folks like Linda Frank, folks like Rena Kavlar, folks like Rabbi Bergson. We've all been involved in the work, and several other shul in town. We've got to continue to do that. Over the years, we've organized drives. We've organized camp at NJDS with Rona Wolf, who was teaching there, and put a curriculum in place to welcome the stranger. to various other activities, supporting folks who are active in resettlement and providing services, such as the Aurora Walker's Point Community Clinic, and supporting the VOLACs that exist in town, such as International Institute of Wisconsin and also Lutheran Social Services. We've also supported Jewish Social Services in Madison. They are resettling folks, and they have a large community of Afghans that they've settled. So I urge us to continue to do that work and to continue to look for ways that we can expand on this work, that we expand on welcoming the stranger and welcoming the stranger within ourselves, working on ways to dismantle racism and all the isms that break us, break our world and pull us away from who we are to be. I'd like to leave you with a couple of quotes that are very important to me. One is by Rabbi Jonathan Sacks. He states, "There is no life without task, no person without a talent, no place without a fragment of God's light, waiting to be discovered and redeemed. No situation without its possibility of sanctification, no moment without its call." The supreme religious challenge is to see God's image in one who is not in our image. And as Ruth Bader Ginsburg of blessed memory states, fight for things that you care about, but do it in such a way that others will follow you. We must remember to share our Jewish values in words, actions, and deeds, to be a light unto the nations, and to remember that every day. Thank you so much for having me. And I know that there was a brief slideshow of pictures just to help us remember all of the work that we've done over the years in Milwaukee and welcoming the stranger and welcoming each other. And these are things that I'd like us to remember in order for us to continue this work. Thank you.
Kai, would you like us to share the photos first, or
Yes,
would you like
please.
to see if there are questions?
Okay.
Which would you prefer?
Oh, I'm sorry. We can show the slides.
Very good, we'll do.
Okay. And just to let everyone know, I'm unable to see the slides, but I'd like you to know that all of the slides are of various projects and activities that we participated in welcoming the stranger and welcoming refugees, and in also elevating the leadership of refugee leaders and also Jews of color in our community.
Can people on Zoom see the slides? Someone give me a thumbs up? Okay, great.
And also, in the pictures, in the slideshow that has been shown, I wanted to talk to you about how we welcomed, there were 3 young men from Eritrea who crossed the desert into Israel, lived in Halot, and so they were African asylum seekers in Israel. They lived there for a couple of years, and they were eventually resettled in Milwaukee by the Pan-African Community Association. Several members of our community supported them and assisted them, and they're doing extremely well. There were 3 young men who weren't brothers, but they were raised as brothers, so they weren't biologically brothers, but they've been through a lot. I'm proud to let you know that one of them has become a truck driver, another has purchased a home, and another has gotten married. So they're all doing really, really well, and they told me to make sure to send their greetings and their gratitude to our community for helping them when they came. When they came, we helped set them up in an apartment and assisted them in getting GED training, all of the things that they would need to do to become successful, especially learning English. When they first arrived here, they knew very little English. They were fluent in Hebrew and, of course, their native tongue of Tigrinya. In addition, there are 2 young men that you'll see that graduated recently from Ethiopia and Eritrea. They were also assisted by our community. They are both doing well, and actually 2 of them recently got married, and they're looking to purchase homes. Over the years, we've also assisted the Syrian community, the Rohingya community especially, and because of that assistance, the Rohingya leadership has really grown, and they actually opened up a center, the Burmese Rohingya Community Center of Wisconsin. And if you remember, a couple of years ago, Emmanuel hosted them, and they spoke. Anwar Kassim, who is from the Rohingya community, spoke about their plans and their hopes and dreams. And so I'm happy to report that just this past April, they were they were able to open that center. So we should continue to support them in every way that we can. They're providing job training, ESL, and after-school services and acclimation services for their community. And what's beautiful about it is it's Rohingya leadership providing services for the Rohingya people. The folks who opened up the center are all interpreters, medical interpreters from the Aurora system, Aurora Medical. Advocate Aurora Health System.
So, Kai,
does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, I'm going to start, Kai. It's Rabbi Berkson. Thank you again. My question to you first is, why is it what's the historical reason that there is no Jewish agency involved in resettlement in Milwaukee?
Well, I know that Jewish Family Services did settle until, I believe, the late 80s, and I'm not sure why there isn't resettlement happening on that end anymore. I do know that over time there's been a lot of strain on the resettlement system. Many agencies closed because of, under the previous administration of the former President Trump, resettlement numbers were cut drastically. So some agencies closed. However, I think that it would be a wonderful opportunity if we could start participating in resettlement again. I know that HIAS, which is the oldest resettlement agency in the country with over 125 years, would welcome that opportunity if a partner could be identified. But for now, Madison is, Jewish Social Services in Madison does resettle, but that's limited to Madison. In Milwaukee, we only have the other 2, which are not Jewish agencies.
I know I don't want to take time away from other people, but so the follow-up is, how do we begin to make something happen so a Jewish organization or a coalition of Jewish organizations can partner with HIAS to be able to resettle here?
I think it's, staying in touch with highest. I think it's right to build a coalition. We were starting to do that with, Linda Frank, and was very active in that work with highest. They put together a Wisconsin grassroots leaders group to, stay in contact with our elected officials about, the cause of welcoming refugees and how to increase those numbers and provide the suitable services. But I think maybe even if we contacted, if we could identify an agency that would want to partner with highest to do this work, we could do that. And we need to stay in touch with the refugee director of the Wisconsin Bureau of Refugee Services, Boyana Martinez-Dorick. If you recall, she spoke, I think, last year at Emmanuel.
Right.
So I think it starts with us letting her know that we're interested in somehow doing this work, resettling again, and also talking to highest and identifying an agency here, whether it's Jewish Family Services or someone else would want to partner with highest.
So I know, Linda, if you'll jump in next. I know, Gloria, you want to say something, and I think Andrew has a better sense of who's on the screen, too. But please, Linda.
Rabbi, you've, first of all, Shana Tova to everybody. You have, hit the nail on the head. Kai has been, really my mentor and my leader in trying to strengthen the coalition in Milwaukee and Wisconsin that we have both been charged by highest to do, and it's been a struggle. And what's interesting, I find very strange, is that the entire refugee issue has become a progressive political issue that is not necessarily a universally, a universal concern for Jews in this country, for the quote organized Jewish community. If you would go to the Jewish Federations of North America website in the last month, it advertised concern and drives for the Haitians who are now recovering from another earthquake. It says nothing about refugees. And Kai, in her current position as an official in the Jewish community, an official, in a branch of the Federation, is now really feet first in this issue. I think that Rabbi, you participated, and Rini and other members of our congregation participated in meetings that we held over and over the last 2.5, 3 years, really trying to get momentum going for the Jewish community to be concerned about and involved with this issue. It has become a political football, and Kai was able to issue a statement as director of the JCRC a few weeks ago, and this was an enormous breakthrough. So I was on the JFS board in the 90s when it was about, done, but when the last resettlement was the last of the Russian Jews. I don't know. I was gone by the time apparently a decision was made to no longer be a resettlement agency. It certainly is a goal, and I think if from our congregation we can establish the momentum, I'm all in.
Thanks, Linda. Yeah, I would be too. This is something that is, I believe, absolutely crucial. Gloria, I know you wanted to say something. I cut you off before. No? All right, so let me, because I really kind of dominated for a sec. So if anyone has questions, at least I'm looking here. I don't see anybody here. Anybody online, if you raise your hand visually or virtually. Andrew can probably see it better than I. Peter, you want to?
Because I've been in a parallel universe doing my own thing. I didn't know that the congregation was involved with the Rohingya refugees, and I've been in a parallel universe doing my own outreach. I didn't know this.
And some of this was going on, Peter, while you were in that parallel universe and pretty sick for a while. Yeah. This goes back now over 2 years, okay? And yeah, we made a huge effort for a while. And you're right, Linda, we kind of stalled on our end too. And I think it's time that we try to really push hard. Do we have a direct contact at highest?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Constantly.
Yeah.
I mean, we have phone calls with Highest all the time. And Kai and I and two women from Rabbi Renee Bauer and Becca Schwartz from Jewish Social Services of Madison have been, sort of the highest liaisons in Wisconsin. And, we've been struggling. I really do think, Rabbi, that if you and your peers, your colleagues, were to make a concerted effort in the community, that might make a difference with the so-called, official organized community. Because, to be honest, Federation here and federations all over the country kind of avoid the issue. And, I personally can't understand how any Jew in this country, everybody was from somewhere. Everybody's forebears were refugees at some point. How Jews in general can, and it's become a political divide, can deny, our concern, our effort for refugees from anywhere, just because it's not us. As Kai started, with Hillel, if we're not for others, who will be for us? And but I do think it's going to take some of the really established leadership, and perhaps it is the rabbis, who need to make this an issue.
Well, on that, you got my commitment.
Thank
but
you.
I think the Afghans who are
And
fleeing are absolutely, you try to put different levels of commitment to it. But so many of these are people who committed to us as Americans when we were there over the past 20 years. We owe them more profoundly, I think, than, pardon me for saying it, than many others. And their lives are in danger, and we need to be moving very quickly with this. So, thanks.
So I think this is Rena Cavalier. So I think one of the things that we need to really think about is, how do we as individuals today make a difference? I have reached out to the social action, social justice groups of the other synagogues and to Tikkun Ha'ir to begin to look at how we can start to collect those things that those 12,000 refugees at Fort McCoy need. Peter Gilbert, who you heard just recently, is loading his car with goods that can go there. I brought stuff in this morning. I understand that Cantor and Deborah have things that that they will be giving him. We need to do, we can't wait. We cannot wait for an organization to present itself. We need to organize ourselves. And there are many of us that are willing to do that. Please reach out to me, to Peter. If you've got things, we will be putting together some boxes here at the synagogue that you can bring new items. They need children's clothes, baby clothes, diapers, shoes, boots, winter wear. Many of them fled with only the clothes on their back. Underwear. I'm trying to think of what else I've read. But we need to think about them, and we can do things today rather than waiting for an organization to get itself together. So please, think about what you have, what you can buy, what you can do to help these folks right now.
And I wanted to add to that Tikkun Ha'ir, I spoke to Tikkun Ha'ir, and we together with the assistance of the Federation, going in all of the shuls, trying to put together a drive for the Afghan refugees. I want everybody to know, I've been in touch with the state refugee director. There are a lot of challenges regarding Fort McCoy right now as far as things being able to be delivered and things being distributed. There have been a couple of articles about the conditions at Fort McCoy being suspect. I don't know if folks have been reading some of I think there was an article that came out in Wisconsin News and also in Madison Times about problems with distribution, with goods not getting to the refugees. So we're looking at that too. But I want you to save the date that you will be seeing a notice soon from Chakuna Ear about donation drops or locations that you can drop donations, and preferably new items for folks. Thank you.
So we thank you, Kai, for all you have done, and I know you can continue to do. And again, we thank you for spending part of your Yom Kippur afternoon with us. We wish you an easy fast for the rest of the day, a Chatima Tova. We're going to cut out on our end so we can start getting ready for the continuation of our services this afternoon. And for some of you on Zoom, we'll see you back in our services in a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Samara Tima Tova. Thank you.
All right, folks, so I'm going to close this Zoom for now. We'll open it up in about 15 minutes, about 10 minutes to 3.
Recording.
Where are you sitting?
there's actually going to be a break. Others, there won't be a break. So I don't know. Oh, I don't know when his sermon is. The sermon as well? Let me see if I can go find that out. Let me find out if I can find out when the sermon is. Bye.